The planet was barren, scared by years of relentless war. Dust storms rolled over the wastelands, the wind howling through the jagged remains of old cities. The once proud Kithara, an ancient and fearsome species known for their strength and precision, had come to this world to wipe out a small human colony. The Kithara were warriors, born to conquer, bred for battle. They had never been challenged in their long history. Their enemies fell before them like wheat before a scythe. But this time, it was different. The humans fought back. Among the Kithara was one of their finest warriors, Lyra. She had led the charge, commanding her squad with ruthless efficiency. Her blade was an extension of her will, her every move calculated and deadly. She had been taught from a young age that nothing, not even the stars themselves, could stand in the way of the Kithara's dominance. But the humans, they were unlike any enemies she had ever faced. Their fight was fierce, unexpected, and unrelenting. The battle raged for hours under the scorching sun, each side trading blows, neither willing to back down. Lyra's squad was caught off guard by the humans' ingenuity. Their weapons were unlike anything the Kithara had ever encountered, and their tactics were unpredictable. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt the sting of doubt. She had expected an easy victory. The humans, after all, were supposed to be weak, insignificant creatures, not capable of withstanding the might of the Kithara. Yet, here they were, standing firm against an overwhelming force. As the battle drew on, Lyra's thoughts were consumed by a strange feeling. Fear. She pushed it away. Fear was a weakness, and she was no weakling. It happened suddenly. One moment, Lyra was slashing through an enemy soldier, and the next, a blast of energy tore through her side. The pain was searing, unlike anything she had ever felt before. She staggered, her vision blurring. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her body, once so strong and unyielding, was now betraying her. She stumbled backward, clutching at her side, but the damage was too great. She collapsed, her strength failing her. The battle continued around her, but Lyra could no longer fight. She could barely move. The humans, relentless as ever, pressed forward, pushing the Kithara back. Her comrades had already retreated, leaving her behind. She had been abandoned, forgotten on the battlefield. The realization struck her hard. Her pride, her confidence, her entire identity as a warrior, everything felt shattered. In her culture, to be left behind was to be lost forever. It was a fate worse than death. Lyra dragged herself across the scorched earth, each movement agony. Her wound was deep, and she could feel the life draining from her. Her mind flickered with memories of her ancestors, of the ancient warriors who had conquered entire worlds. She had been raised on their stories, taught to believe in the invincibility of her people. But now, as the sky darkened and the winds howled, she understood the truth. The Kithara were not invincible. The humans were not weak. And she was alone. With every breath, Lyra's strength waned. The world around her seemed to blur, her consciousness slipping away. She tried to focus, to push through the pain, but it was becoming harder. She needed to find shelter, a place to hide, to heal. But there was nothing but the endless wasteland stretching before her. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of something burning, something she couldn't identify. Her vision faltered, and she collapsed again, unable to rise. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time had no meaning now. Lyra's mind drifted in and out of clarity, her thoughts growing foggy. She could hear distant sounds, the hum of machinery, the crackle of radio static. It sounded like humans, but her mind couldn't make sense of it. She felt the earth beneath her, cool and unforgiving. Her body was stiff, and her breathing was shallow. She had given up on survival. She was a warrior, and warriors were not meant to die like this. Abandoned, weak, and alone. Then there was movement. Lyra barely registered it at first, too weak to react. But as the shadow of a figure loomed over her, her senses sparked back to life. Her hand instinctively reached for her blade, but her body refused to obey. The figure knelt beside her, and she saw the face of a human, a man. His expression was calm, almost compassionate, something Lyra had never seen in an enemy before. The man didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her, his eyes scanning her injuries, his face calm and focused. For a moment, Lyra was confused. The human could easily finish her off. She was at his mercy, lying vulnerable and broken. But instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out medical supplies. Lyra tried to move, to resist, but her strength was gone. The human didn't seem to care about the danger. He worked swiftly, cleaning her wound and bandaging it with skilled hands. His actions were steady, methodical, as if he had done this many times before. Despite herself, Lyra felt something stir within her, an unfamiliar feeling. Gratitude. No, that couldn't be it. She was a Kithera warrior. She didn't feel gratitude, especially not toward a human. Yet, as he continued to tend to her, she couldn't deny the strange sense of relief that washed over her. She was no longer alone. When the man finished, he didn't leave. Instead, he stayed by her side, keeping watch as the hours passed. His name, she learned, was Sergeant Alex Carter, a soldier from a nearby human settlement. He wasn't here to fight her. He was here to help her, to keep her alive. It was something Lyra couldn't quite understand. Why would a human risk his life to save a Kithera? In her eyes, they were enemies, sworn to destroy each other. Yet here he was, offering her something far more powerful than any weapon: compassion. As the darkness of the night settled over the planet, Lyra found herself feeling something she hadn't thought possible: hope. She wasn't sure if it was the hope of survival or the hope of understanding this strange human, but it was there, buried deep beneath the anger and pride she had always carried. And as she lay there, still wounded but no longer alone, she realized something else. The Kithera had never known defeat at the hands of a human, but they had never known the power of mercy either. And in this moment, Lyra was beginning to understand that perhaps, just perhaps, mercy was a strength the Kithera had overlooked. Lyra's world had never felt so fragile. The days blurred together in a haze of pain and confusion, but through it all, there was one constant: the human, Sergeant Alex Carter, who never left her side. He was always there, providing what little comfort he could, tending to her wounds with steady hands, and offering words of encouragement she couldn't quite understand. It wasn't just his actions, though. It was the way he looked at her. There was no fear in his eyes, no hatred, only a calmness that seemed out of place. The Kithera and humans were enemies. That was the way it had always been. Yet here he was, a human, saving her life, risking his own to do so. Lyra struggled to make sense of it. As the days passed, Lyra began to heal, but her mind was still a battlefield. Her species had always prided itself on strength, on the ability to crush any opponent beneath their feet. Yet here, in the face of a human who could have easily left her to die, she found herself in a strange position: vulnerable, dependent. She had been trained to survive on her own, to never show weakness. But Carter had shown her something she had never expected: kindness. She often watched him from the corner of her eye as he worked, cleaning and cooking, building a small camp in the desolate landscape. There was an ease to his movements, a quiet confidence that confused her. He wasn't a warrior, not like her. His hands were not calloused from years of fighting, and his posture was not one of someone accustomed to war. Yet there was a resilience in him, something Lyra could not deny. He had saved her not once, but many times. When her fever spiked, when the pain threatened to overwhelm her, he was there, applying medicine, making sure she was comfortable. She had never known humans to be so gentle. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky, Lyra finally spoke to him. Why? Her voice was hoarse, strained from days of disuse. Carter looked up from the fire he was tending, his expression unreadable. Why what? He asked, his tone calm. Why are you helping me? Lyra struggled to sit up, the effort making her wince in pain. I am your enemy. I was sent to destroy your people. Carter's gaze softened, but there was no fear in his eyes, only understanding. You're more than just an enemy to me, Lyra. I see you as a person, not a target. I couldn't leave you out here to die. Lyra felt a strange, tight knot form in her chest. She had never been treated like this by any of her kind. The Kythera saw their enemies as obstacles to be eliminated, not beings worthy of mercy. Her whole life, she had been taught to view humans as weak, to dismiss them as nothing more than prey. Yet here was one of them, treating her with more respect than she had ever received from her own people. As the fire crackled between them, Lyra felt a pang of something deep within her. Was it gratitude? No, she refused to believe it. She was a warrior, not some helpless creature. Yet, as the days passed, she began to feel an unspoken bond with the human who had saved her life. They had nothing in common. He was soft where she was strong, peaceful where she was violent. But there was something about him that resonated with her. It was his unwavering determination to survive, to help her, no matter the cost. She saw in him the same fierce will to live that had kept her alive, even when all seemed lost. But it wasn't just the small acts of kindness that slowly chipped away at her resistance. It was the stories Carter told her. At first, they were just small talk, stories about his family, his life back home, the colony he came from. He spoke of the hardships humans had faced, how they had built their world from nothing, how they had struggled and persevered in the face of overwhelming odds. Lyra had never heard such stories from her own people. The Kythera were proud, but their pride was often rooted in conquest, not survival. The more Carter spoke, the more Lyra found herself listening, hanging on to his every word. His words were simple, but they carried weight, something she could not quite understand, yet something that pulled at her deep inside. One night, as they sat together by the fire, a distant noise caught Lyra's attention. It was faint, but it was there. Voices, movement in the distance. Carter stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. Lyra's body tensed, and for a moment, she was back on the battlefield, the adrenaline coursing through her veins, preparing for the fight that was sure to come. But then Carter held up a hand, signaling for her to stay quiet. They're coming closer, Carter whispered. But it's not a human patrol. Lyra narrowed her eyes, trying to see through the darkness. Her senses, sharp as ever, could make out the shapes of figures moving in the distance. They were too far to make out clearly, but Lyra knew enough to recognize them. Kythera, her people, they were here, searching for her. Panic surged through her, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Fear, yes, but also a strange sense of betrayal. The Kythera had left her behind, abandoning her to die, and now they were coming to finish the job. She had never felt so alone, so utterly forsaken. Yet, as she glanced at Carter, she realized something. He wasn't just a human. He wasn't just her savior. He was now her ally. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Carter didn't hesitate. Without a word, he moved to her side, his movements swift and purposeful. He knew what had to be done. Together, they quickly gathered what little they had, supplies, weapons, and makeshift tools, and moved silently toward a small cave nearby. Carter's eyes scanned the darkness, always alert, always watching for movement. Lyra's heart raced in her chest. She had never been in a situation like this before. To hide, to run. These were not actions of a warrior, but of someone desperate. Yet here she was, placing her trust in a human she had once viewed as nothing more than an obstacle. Inside the cave, they settled in, waiting. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of what was coming. The Kythera would search for her. They would find her. And then, there would be a fight. A brutal, unforgiving battle. But this time, it would be different. She had no desire to kill her own people. She wasn't sure if she could. The betrayal of being left behind, of being discarded as if she were nothing, burned deep within her. But Carter's kindness had opened something inside her, something she hadn't expected. As the hours passed, the voices outside grew louder, closer. The Kithera were near. Lyra took a deep breath, her body tense. This was it. The fight was inevitable. But with Carter by her side, she no longer felt like the hunted. For the first time in her life, she felt something different. Hope. The ancient ruins stretched across the desolate landscape, their stone structures a testament to a forgotten civilization. Tall, jagged towers once gleaming with the light of an advanced era now stood in silence, their surfaces weathered by time. In the midst of these remnants of history, a small group of explorers made their way through the broken pathways, cautiously moving forward, unsure of what awaited them in the shadows of the past. Among them was Captain Kale, a seasoned veteran of countless missions, his mind sharp and ever watchful, and the young scientist, Lyra, whose fascination with the unknown had led them here. This planet, long abandoned and erased from most star maps, held something that had drawn their attention, a mystery buried deep in its core. The object they were searching for was ancient, almost mythical in its significance, but no one knew exactly what it was. As the group walked deeper into the ruins, a sense of unease settled over them. The air was thick with the weight of the past, and the silence felt unnatural. Lyra could feel the pulse of her heartbeat quicken with every step. She had read the legends, the stories of a powerful artifact left behind by a civilization that had once dominated the galaxy. These stories had always seemed like fairy tales, whispered from one generation to the next. But here they were, standing at the threshold of that very myth, unsure of what they might find. "We're getting close," Kale said, his voice breaking the silence. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of urgency to it. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of his weapon, ever ready, as if expecting danger to spring from the shadows. "Stay alert." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. She had always believed in the possibility of ancient technologies, the remnants of lost races with knowledge far beyond anything humanity had ever discovered. But nothing could have prepared her for the eerie sensation that seemed to surround them now. The walls of the structures were covered with strange markings, symbols that neither Kale nor Lyra could decipher. They were old, older than anything the explorers had ever encountered, and they pulsed with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of Lyra's neck stand on end. "What do you think these markings mean?" Lyra asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kale didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed on the walls, studying them as if trying to make sense of the cryptic symbols. He didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever they had come here to find, it was no ordinary relic. There was something far more dangerous at play, something the civilization that had built these structures had left behind for a reason. "I don't know," Kale replied, finally looking away from the walls and toward the path ahead. "But we'll find out soon enough." The group continued onward, the path becoming narrower and more treacherous. They had entered what seemed to be the heart of the ruins, a vast underground chamber that echoed with every footstep. The walls were lined with intricate carvings, and the air was thick with a strange, almost oppressive energy. Lyra could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a sensation of something ancient and powerful watching them, waiting for something. And then, as they reached the center of the chamber, they found it, a massive stone pedestal, towering over them, with an object resting upon it. The object was a sphere, glowing faintly with a soft, pulsing light. Its surface was smooth, like glass, but it radiated a power that made the air around it feel charged. Lyra stepped forward instinctively, her curiosity overcoming the sense of danger that lingered in the air. "This is it," she whispered, her voice reverberating through the chamber. "This is what we've been searching for." Kale didn't move. His instincts told him to be cautious, to wait, but Lyra was already advancing, her hand outstretched toward the artifact. The closer she got, the more intense the energy became. It was almost suffocating, and for a moment, Kale considered stopping her, but it was too late. As Lyra's fingers brushed the surface of the sphere, a sudden, blinding light filled the room, and the ground beneath them trembled violently. Kale's heart raced as he grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her back just as the chamber seemed to collapse in on itself. The walls cracked, and the ceiling groaned under the weight of something far more powerful than they had anticipated. The sphere was no longer glowing softly. It was pulsing with a violent energy, and the chamber began to collapse around them. "Get out! Now!" Kale shouted, his voice a command. But Lyra couldn't move. Her body was frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The power emanating from the sphere had taken hold of her, and it was as if the artifact itself was drawing her in, pulling her closer to its source. The walls cracked louder now, and the very foundations of the ruins began to buckle under the pressure. In a panic, Kale pulled Lyra's arm again, his mind racing for a way out. But the path they had come from was already blocked, and the exit was nowhere in sight. The only way forward was to face whatever lay ahead. The energy was growing stronger, more volatile with each passing second, and Kale knew they didn't have much time. "Lyra, we have to move." Kale's voice was desperate now, but she was still mesmerized, her fingers brushing against the glowing sphere as though it held all the answers to the universe. "Lyra, snap out of it." It wasn't until a deafening roar erupted from the depths of the chamber that Lyra finally broke free from her trance. The ground trembled violently, and the sound of shifting stone echoed all around them. She turned to Kale, her face pale and filled with shock, as if she had just awoken from a nightmare. What is happening?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kale didn't answer. He didn't have time. He grabbed her again and pulled her toward the only exit, an ancient archway that had once led to a different part of the ruins, but now appeared to be the only way out. The two of them sprinted through the collapsing halls, the ground shaking beneath them. As the ruins crumbled, the energy from the artifact was causing the entire structure to collapse, and the walls were closing in. They could hear the sounds of falling stone and the groaning of the ancient chamber as it fell apart around them. With a final burst of adrenaline, Kale and Lyra dove through the archway, just as the ceiling caved in behind them. They tumbled onto the ground, bruised but alive, as the entrance to the chamber collapsed, sealing them off from whatever ancient horrors lay within. Panting heavily, Kale turned to Lyra, his eyes filled with urgency. "We have to leave. Now." Lyra nodded, but her gaze was still fixed on the ruins behind them. The artifact, the power it held, it wasn't just a relic, it was a weapon, and the ancient civilization that had hidden it away had done so for a reason. They had awoken something that should have stayed buried. As they made their way back to the ship, the weight of what they had uncovered pressed heavily on their minds. The ancient legacy of this planet was far from over, and they had only just begun to understand the danger they had unleashed. The distant planet of Gorith had always been a mystery. Its thick atmosphere and constant storms made it nearly impossible to explore. Yet to those daring enough to try, the rewards were said to be great. Hidden ruins from an ancient civilization, forgotten technologies that could change the course of history. Captain Elias Blackwood, a seasoned explorer, and his crew had received a cryptic signal from the planet, something they couldn't ignore. The message was short, garbled, but it contained coordinates, and from the frequency of the signal, it seemed recent, no more than a few days old. Someone was on Gorith, and they were trying to tell the galaxy something. As the ship descended through the turbulent clouds, the crew could see the planet's surface barely visible through the rain and haze. Elias stood at the helm, his mind racing with possibilities. The signal could be a trap. It could be nothing more than a long-forgotten distress call finally reaching its destination after years of silence. But something in his gut told him that they were about to uncover something much more dangerous than they realized. The ship finally touched down on the wet ground, and the crew suited up, stepping out into the harsh environment. The air was thick with moisture, the wind howling, and the ground below their boots felt unstable, as if the planet itself was alive and shifting beneath them. As they ventured further into the jungle-like terrain, they found the remains of a long-abandoned research facility. The metal structures were rusted, covered in vines, and the doors were locked tight. Yet the faint signal they had followed seemed to be coming from within. It wasn't an old distress call, but something current. Someone, or something, was still there. "This place doesn't feel right," said Layla, the ship's security officer, her voice low and cautious. "I've been on planets with ruins before, but this feels different." Elias nodded, but he didn't voice his own growing unease. They had no choice but to press forward. The signal was coming from deep within the facility. As they entered through a maintenance door that had somehow been left unlocked, the temperature seemed to drop, and a strange humming sound filled the air. The place felt alive, as though it had been waiting for them. The walls were covered in unfamiliar symbols, and the floor was littered with what appeared to be discarded equipment. It was clear that whatever had happened here, it wasn't recent, but the signal was real. "It's not an automated message," Elias said, his voice tense. "Someone's been here recently." They made their way deeper into the heart of the facility. The further they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew heavy with a sense of dread. They passed through darkened corridors and rooms filled with strange machinery that flickered intermittently, as if still powered by some unknown force. The signal led them to a central chamber at the core of the building. In the center of the room, they found a large metallic object, covered in dust and debris. It was an artifact, but unlike anything they had ever seen before. Its surface shimmered in the dim light, reflecting the faint glow of the facility's dying power. It was shaped like a sphere, with intricate patterns etched into its surface, but there was something unnatural about it, something that made the hairs on the back of Elias's neck stand up. "What do you think it is?" Layla asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias studied the artifact. "I don't know, but I've seen something like it before in old archives. It's a containment device." "A containment device," Layla repeated. "For what?" Before Elias could respond, the humming sound intensified. The air around them vibrated, and the walls trembled. Suddenly, the artifact began to glow, its surface rippling like liquid. A sound, almost like a voice, echoed through the chamber. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, clearer, as though the artifact itself was speaking. But it wasn't a language they could understand. "What is that?" Layla asked, taking a cautious step back. "It's not a voice," Elias muttered, his eyes narrowing. "It's some sort of transmission. A warning, perhaps." The temperature dropped even further, and the glowing light from the artifact shifted, casting strange shadows on the walls. The crew stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Then, without warning, the room was plunged into darkness. The hum stopped, the lights flickered, and for a moment, everything went still. It felt as though time had stopped. A faint, sickly green light began to glow from the edges of the artifact, and a low growl reverberated through the air, as if something deep within the planet was awakening. The floor beneath their feet began to shake violently, and the walls creaked under the pressure. "Everyone, get out of here. Now," Elias shouted, snapping his crew into action. But as they turned to leave, the doors that had been opened just moments ago slammed shut. The facility's systems had come to life, and they were trapped. The glow from the artifact grew stronger, pulsating in rhythm with the growl that had now transformed into a deep, guttural roar. Something was emerging from the depths of the planet, something that had been sealed away for centuries. "We need to find another way out," Layla shouted, pulling at the locked doors in vain. Elias grabbed her shoulder. "There is no time. We have to destroy that artifact before it's too late." The group rushed toward the artifact, but it was already too late. From the shadows emerged something terrible, a creature, massive and terrifying, its body covered in scales that glowed with the same sickly green hue as the artifact. Its eyes were wide and feral, its jaws dripping with something toxic. The creature stepped into the chamber, its very presence causing the walls to shake. "This is no ordinary creature," Elias said, his voice filled with realization. "This is what was contained within the artifact." The creature growled, its massive body coiling, ready to strike. It had been bound by the ancient civilization, a weapon of unimaginable power that had been sealed away for a reason. Now the signal had awakened it, and there was no turning back. The crew scattered, trying to avoid the creature's attacks, but it was relentless. Elias reached for his weapon, but he knew they couldn't fight something like this. They had to disable the artifact first. "Layla, the controls. Find a way to shut it down," Elias shouted as he darted toward the creature, distracting it long enough for her to get to the device. Layla didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the control panel, slamming her hands against the interface. Sparks flew and alarms blared, but nothing happened. The artifact was drawing power from somewhere deeper within the planet, and there was no way to shut it off. Elias grabbed a nearby piece of metal, using it as a weapon to fend off the creature's attacks, but it was a losing battle. The creature was too strong, and the artifact was still glowing, feeding its energy into the beast. Then, with a violent roar, the creature lunged forward, knocking Elias to the ground. His vision blurred as he struggled to breathe, the weight of the creature pressing down on him. Layla was still at the control panel, her fingers desperately trying to stop the flow of power. In a last-ditch effort, Elias reached for a detonator he had hidden in his pack, the only thing capable of destroying the artifact. As the creature loomed over him, ready to strike the final blow, Elias activated the detonator. The blast rocked the facility, sending shockwaves through the structure. The artifact exploded in a flash of light, and the creature's scream echoed through the chambers before everything went silent. The walls of the facility collapsed in on themselves, the earth shaking beneath them. Elias and Layla barely made it out, their bodies battered but alive. The creature, and the threat it represented, was gone, but the mystery of what had been awakened remained. The planet of Korath had given them a glimpse into a hidden world, a world of ancient technologies, dark powers, and dangerous secrets. But the threat had been stopped for now. The message, however, remained clear. There were things buried deep within the galaxy, and some of them were better left forgotten. The galaxy had always been a place of endless conflict, with factions and species locked in an eternal struggle for dominance. The Terran Alliance, a once minor force, had risen to prominence through sheer strength and cunning, becoming a beacon of hope for the oppressed. But in the far reaches of space, beyond the territories of even the bravest explorers, an unknown threat was emerging. This was the story of how an unlikely alliance was forged, one that would determine the future of the galaxy itself. Captain Aria Drake stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her eyes scanning the endless void of space. Her ship, one of the most advanced in the Terran fleet, had just entered an uncharted region known as the Shroud Nebula. The area was infamous for its deadly storms and gravitational anomalies, but it had also become the site of a strange series of distress signals emanating from a hidden location deep within the nebula. The messages were fragmented and disjointed, but the one thing that stood out was the language, an ancient, long-forgotten dialect, one that had not been used for millennia. Someone or something was out there, and they needed help. "This is madness, Captain," Lieutenant Roderick said, stepping beside her. "No ship has ever returned from the Shroud. We could be walking into a trap." Aria glanced at him, her expression unwavering. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation. If this is a message from a long-lost race, it could be the key to winning the war against the Zarkar Dominion. If it's a trap, we'll handle it. But we can't ignore the chance to make an alliance, especially one that could shift the balance of power." The Zarkar Dominion, a ruthless empire that had been expanding at an alarming rate, was threatening the stability of the galaxy. Despite their military might, the Dominion had one weakness: their reliance on technology. If the Terran Alliance could discover the source of this mysterious signal, it could give them an advantage in the war. But it was a risk that only the bold would take. The Vanguard plunged deeper into the nebula, the lights of the ship flickering as they passed through the swirling clouds of gas and dust. The distress signal grew louder, its frequency now clear and unmistakable. There was no turning back now. They had arrived at their destination. As the ship descended toward a planet at the center of the nebula, the crew's tension was palpable. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety, each crew member bracing for the unknown. The surface of the planet appeared barren, covered in jagged mountains and deep, vast canyons. It was a place that looked devoid of life, yet the signal was coming from the surface. "We're not alone," Arya muttered under her breath, her hand gripping the console in front of her. "Prepare for landing." The Vanguard touched down on a flat expanse of land, its engines roaring as they powered down. The crew disembarked, stepping onto the cold surface of the alien world. The sky above them was dark, the air thin and filled with an eerie silence. The landscape was barren, save for strange structures in the distance. They seemed ancient, their architecture unlike anything the Terrans had ever seen. "Do you think this is the work of the Eldari?" Lieutenant Roderick asked, his voice filled with awe. The Eldari were an ancient race thought to have disappeared thousands of years ago. If they were behind this, it could mean they had uncovered a forgotten technology that could turn the tide of the war. Arya shook her head. "The Eldari are gone. This is something different." As they made their way toward the structures, a strange humming noise filled the air. It seemed to be coming from the largest of the buildings, a towering spire that loomed over the desolate landscape. The closer they got, the more the ground beneath their feet trembled. There was a presence here, something alive, but it was hidden, watching them. "This is it," Arya said. "Stay alert. We don't know what's waiting for us inside." The group entered the spire, its interior dark and cold. They navigated through narrow, winding corridors, their steps echoing in the emptiness. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, but they were unfamiliar, symbols that no one could decipher. The further they ventured, the more disorienting the place became. It felt like they were moving in circles, but they pressed on, determined to reach the source of the signal. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the spire. In the center stood a massive device, pulsating with energy. It was like nothing they had ever seen, a fusion of organic and mechanical elements, its surface alive with an unnatural glow. The signal was emanating from this device, its frequency vibrating through the air. "What is this?" Roderick asked, his voice filled with awe and fear. "What kind of technology is this?" Before Arya could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was not a voice in the traditional sense, but a series of thoughts projected directly into their minds. The words were clear, but the tone was foreign, as though they were speaking to a consciousness not bound by the limitations of time and space. "Who dares disturb the slumber of the ancients?" The voice boomed. Arya stiffened. "We mean no harm," she replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence. "We come seeking an alliance. The galaxy is at war, and we need help. The Zarkar Dominion threatens us all." The voice was silent for a long moment, and Arya could feel the weight of ancient eyes studying them. Then, finally, the voice spoke again, its tone less hostile, but still filled with a cold, distant power. "You seek our aid, but you do not understand what you ask. The Zarkar Dominion is not the true threat. There are others, forces far older, far more powerful than your kind can comprehend. You will need more than alliances to survive what is coming." Arya's heart raced. The message was clear. They were not facing just a military threat, but something far darker, something that had been hidden for eons. The Zarkar Dominion was merely a symptom of a greater danger. "Then what must we do?" Arya asked, her voice filled with urgency. The voice's response was chilling. "You must awaken the lost powers of the ancients. But be warned, the cost will be great. Those who seek our aid must be willing to sacrifice everything. A shiver ran down Aria's spine. She had expected a battle, but she had never imagined it would lead them to this, an ancient race, offering the power to defeat their enemies at a price that could destroy them all. As the chamber began to shake, the glowing device flared brightly, and the walls of the spire crumbled around them. They had awakened something, and now it was up to them to decide if they were willing to pay the price for survival. The first step of their alliance had been made, but it was only the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same again.